19 years, 2 daughters, a love story that glittered under every spotlight Hollywood could throw at it. And then, 4 words shattered the illusion. I can't pretend anymore. When Nicole Kidman finally said it out loud, the fairy tale millions believed in cracked wide open. For almost 2 decades, she and Keith Urban weren't just a couple. They were the couple, proof, people thought, that real love could survive fame, distance, and the chaos of celebrity life. But behind those flawless red carpet smiles and anniversary tributes, a very different story had been building. One that ended in a single court filing on September 30th, 2025. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a collision of 3 things Hollywood thrives on: a once-in-a-generation love story, a multi-million-dollar prenup that few knew existed, and a swirl of rumors that no one could ignore. And at the center of it all stood Nicole, steady, quiet, and unwilling to keep pretending. The moment that line hit the tabloids, everything changed. Headlines exploded. Fans dissected every photo, every interview, every lyric. But the truth of how this love story unraveled isn't found in gossip columns. It's hidden in the timeline. The contracts and the choices that led 2 of the world's biggest stars to finally say, enough. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is stop performing a perfect life. On the surface, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's split looked like a typical Hollywood breakup. A quiet filing, a few headlines, and then the inevitable wave of speculation. But if you zoom in on the timeline, the real story isn't loud. It's hidden in the paperwork, the appearances, and the silence that followed. It all started on September 30th, 2025. A single court document landed in Los Angeles County, stamped with the words, "Irreconcilable differences." Just like that, an 18-year marriage was officially set on a new course. There was no public statement, no teary press conference, no joint Instagram post with carefully chosen words. Just legal language, cold, clear, and final. But here's where most people stopped paying attention, and where the trail actually begins. Weeks before that filing, subtle signs were stacking up. Insiders later revealed that the couple had been living largely separate lives throughout the summer. Keith had quietly moved into his own place, while Nicole stayed in the family home with their daughters. To the public, it might have looked like busy schedules. Behind the scenes, it was a clear shift, and then came Nicole's moves after the filing. Just days later, she was seen at Amphar Dallas, poised and elegant, supporting a cause close to her heart. Not long after, she appeared at Paris Fashion Week with her daughters, not as half of a power couple, but as a woman stepping forward on her own terms. There were no attempts to hide, no desperate optics to keep up appearances. The message was subtle but unmistakable. She was in control of the narrative now. These carefully timed appearances weren't about performance. They were about poise. While headlines obsessed over rumors, Nicole's calendar told the real story. A woman who had already accepted the end long before the rest of the world caught up. And tucked inside that quiet court filing were more than just legal phrases. They outlined custody arrangements, property divisions, and the terms of a life being dismantled piece by piece. Not through drama, but through paperwork. Not through chaos, but through precision. Because sometimes the biggest reveals don't come from explosive interviews or viral videos. They come from the dates, the filings, and the quiet decisions made behind closed doors. But the paperwork alone didn't explain why it all unraveled. For that, you have to look at what was pulling them apart long before lawyers got involved. Long before court documents were filed and rumors started swirling, the real cracks were forming in the most ordinary way, through calendars, flight schedules, and empty spaces at the dinner table. For years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban lived in 2 different worlds that somehow overlapped. She was chasing scripts that took her from London to Australia, filming intense dramas and award-winning series that demanded months on set. He was on the road, headlining sold-out arenas, crisscrossing continents on tour buses, living by sound checks and stage lights. On paper, it looked magical. Hollywood royalty meets Nashville's golden boy, each thriving in their own lane. But love doesn't live on paper. It lives in shared mornings, late-night talks, and being there when the world turns quiet. And that's exactly where the math stopped working. They tried to make it fit. When Nicole was filming overseas, Keith would fly in for a weekend, sometimes just for a night, to keep that connection alive. When Keith's tour stretched on, Nicole rearranged press junkets and brought the kids along just to bridge the distance. For a while it worked. Those short bursts of togetherness became their rhythm. Intense, romantic, like a movie montage. But real life isn't a montage. The in-between moments started to stretch longer. Reunions became quick check-ins. Phone calls replaced shared mornings. And slowly, without either of them meaning for it to happen, parallel lives started to feel like separate ones. For Nicole, acting had always been more than a job. It was her craft, her identity. For Keith, music wasn't just a career, it was his lifeline. Neither could simply pause their world without losing a part of themselves. And so they kept juggling. Film sets, tour buses, parenting, time zones. The glamorous facade stayed intact, but underneath, the weight of their success was pulling in opposite directions. This wasn't about scandal. There was no big betrayal here, no single explosive fight. It was something more subtle. Two careers so powerful, they created a gravitational pull strong enough to warp the space between them. They both spoke in interviews about making family time sacred. They weren't lying. They really did fight to protect it. But sometimes even the strongest love can't outrun distance that never truly closes. By the time summer 2025 arrived, their calendars weren't just full, they were colliding. Film shoots, world tours, press obligations, award ceremonies. There was barely room left for the life they'd built together. And in that quiet, stretched space, emotional distance took root. They were still a team in public, the smiles, the hand-holding, the red carpets. But privately, they were living two fully separate lives connected by effort, not ease. And that's the part no headline ever really captures. Love can survive storms, but sometimes it crumbles under the weight of success itself. And when the silence between two people grows louder than the applause around them, the world starts filling in the blanks. Which is exactly what happened next. When two people like Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban step back from the spotlight together, the world doesn't wait for explanations. It creates them. And in the quiet space between their separate lives, whispers started to grow louder than any official statement ever could. It began innocently enough, a few viral clips, a handful of fan comments, and one name that suddenly lit up the internet, Maggie Baugh. She's a 25-year-old guitarist who's been performing with Keith on tour. Fans noticed the chemistry on stage, the playful moments between songs, the little details that eagle-eyed viewers love to dissect. One particular video sent social media into overdrive. During a performance of The Fighter, Keith switched up a lyric, dropping Maggie's name into the song. It was meant to be a fun, spontaneous moment, but to fans already on high alert, it felt like a clue. The clip was replayed, slowed down, captioned, and analyzed like evidence in a courtroom. TikTok flooded with theories. Reddit threads spun timelines. Even Maggie's own father added fuel with a vague comment that wasn't exactly a denial. And just like that, what might have been harmless stage banter turned into something bigger, the internet's favorite storyline, the other woman. But here's the truth. None of it has been confirmed. Neither Keith nor Maggie has said a single word to make those whispers official. Nicole hasn't publicly addressed it either. Every headline about a rumored guitarist comes from speculation, not statements. And this is where public perception fills in the blanks. The timing didn't help. As these rumors picked up steam, Nicole's divorce filing hit the courts. People connected dots that may not have even been in the same picture. New woman, marriage cracks, lyric change. It was irresistible gossip fuel. It's important to understand something about celebrity stories. The absence of information doesn't quiet the noise, it amplifies it. When two stars go silent, the internet builds its own narrative. And this time, those whispers attach themselves to the unraveling of one of Hollywood's most admired marriages. Was Maggie Baugh really part of the reason? Maybe, maybe not. Right now, it's all speculation. What we do know is that these whispers added emotional weight to an already complicated story. Because when people believe they've spotted someone else in the picture, the heartbreak suddenly feels sharper. And while gossip focused on who might have been standing next to Keith on stage, there was something happening off stage that was far more concrete. A prenup clause that would make headlines all on its own. While social media obsessed over stage clips and whispers, something far less flashy, but way more explosive, was quietly buried inside the legal paperwork. The prenup, in Hollywood, prenups are standard. But this one? According to multiple reports, it came with a clause that fans have since dubbed the cocaine clause. And it's not just a catchy nickname. If the rumors are true, this single line could be worth over $10 million. Let's rewind to 2006. Nicole Kidman was already one of the most powerful actresses in the world. Keith Urban was a rising country star with undeniable talent and a very public history of battling addiction. When they married, Nicole reportedly insisted on a clause that would protect both her finances and their future together. Here's how reports describe it. If Keith were to relapse into drug or alcohol use, Nicole could walk away with her entire fortune untouched. But if he stayed sober, he'd receive a yearly bonus, around $600,000 per year of sobriety throughout the marriage. Multiply that over nearly 2 decades, and you're looking at a rumored payout of roughly $10 to $12 million. Now, to be clear, this information hasn't come from court filings made public. It's based on entertainment and legal insider reports. Neither Nicole nor Keith has confirmed or denied it. But the rumor took on a life of its own because, well, it sounds like Hollywood. Love, trust, and millions of dollars locked into a single clause. And it kind of makes sense. Keith entered rehab just months after they got married. Nicole stood by him during that time, supporting his recovery. The clause, if real, wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability. A way to protect both of them. Her from financial fallout, him from the easy slide back into destructive habits. Over the years, Keith has publicly celebrated his sobriety. Interviews, tour speeches, and award show moments often included gratitude for Nicole's support and the turning point that changed his life. And if the reports are accurate, every one of those sober years also came with a financial reward built into their marriage contract. Fast forward to 2025, and that clause is suddenly headline material again. Divorce doesn't just end a love story. It activates every line of the legal agreements they signed. Fans started doing the math. 18 years x $600,000 or $10.8 million, not including adjustments. And in a story already packed with emotional stakes, this number turned into a plot twist. It's important to emphasize, this is all reported, not proven. But the fact that this prenup detail spread like wildfire tells you something about how people view celebrity relationships, not just as love stories, but as contracts with plot lines. Nicole's estimated net worth is around $250 million. Keith sits at roughly $75 million, and they've both built empires. But in the court of public opinion, that rumored clause became symbolic. It wasn't just money. It was a reminder that their love story was also a legal one. A love that had guardrails, incentives, and consequences written into the fine print. And behind the numbers, there's something deeper. Trust was once strong enough to put a price on accountability. But no amount of money can fix what emotional distance has already fractured. And while fans were still digesting those dollar signs, Nicole's quiet, powerful words echoed again. I can't pretend anymore. This wasn't just about prenups or payouts. It was about the moment someone stops trying to hold everything together. When Nicole Kidman reportedly told friends, I can't pretend anymore, it wasn't said in front of cameras. There was no staged moment, no dramatic speech for the world to consume. It was quiet, personal, honest, and in many ways, it explained more than any legal document or gossip headline ever could. Those 4 words weren't about theatrics. They were about reaching a breaking point that had been building for years. For so long, Nicole had been the one holding the image together. She showed up to events, supported Keith through rehab, balanced a global acting career with motherhood, and worked to keep their family stable despite living on separate continents half the time. In interviews, she gushed about him being her deep, deep love. On red carpets, they were inseparable. The world saw a couple that had figured out what so many others couldn't. But behind closed doors, the emotional gaps kept growing. Reports from those close to her say that she began to feel unheard, unsupported, and increasingly alone in the marriage. This wasn't about one explosive fight. It was about years of little moments where her emotional needs went unacknowledged. Years of carrying the public image of a perfect marriage while privately feeling the foundation crack. I can't pretend anymore wasn't a swipe at Keith. It was a boundary. A line drawn after nearly 2 decades of trying to make 2 different lives move in the same direction. When someone reaches that point, it's rarely sudden. It's usually the result of a long, quiet unraveling. The kind that happens in late-night phone calls that end in silence, in missed moments that start to feel permanent, in the realization that being in love and feeling seen aren't always the same thing. And for Nicole, that line came with a kind of maturity only time gives you. At 58, she wasn't the young actress navigating Hollywood's pressures anymore. She wasn't protecting a fragile new marriage. She was a woman who had built her life, raised her children, weathered storms, and finally decided she didn't need to keep up appearances for anyone. This is where the story shifts from romance and rumor to something far more human. This is the moment the performance ends. No red carpet can hide the exhaustion of pretending everything's fine. No carefully worded interview can fill the emotional space that's grown too wide. And when she said those words, it reframed the entire story, not as a sudden Hollywood implosion, but as a woman choosing honesty over image. It's easy to get lost in headlines about prenups, rumored names, or viral videos. But at its core, this moment wasn't about scandal. It was about truth. A simple, powerful admission that the life she had been trying to hold together no longer reflected her reality. And that decision, to stop pretending, would shape everything that came next. Divorce isn't just about two people separating. It's about everything that was built between them being quietly rearranged. And for Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, the heart of that rearrangement was their daughters. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret have always been the true center of their world. Through red carpets, tours, film sets, and flights that stretched across continents, they were the constant thread. And when the marriage finally broke, custody became less about legal strategy and more about anchoring their daughters' lives to something stable. According to reports, Nicole was granted primary custody of both girls. On paper, it's a schedule. Roughly 306 days a year with her, and 59 with Keith. But beyond those numbers is a much deeper story. For most of their marriage, Nicole has been the residential parent, the one managing home life between shoots, schools, and family routines. She's always built her schedule around creating that sense of stability. This isn't to say Keith isn't a present father. By all accounts, he's devoted. But his life, stadium tours, night after night performances, and constant travel has always existed in motion. Nicole's has, in many ways, been the home base. The custody arrangement reflects the reality that already existed long before the divorce papers were signed. And here's where Nicole's quiet strategy becomes clear. In the weeks following the filing, she didn't retreat. She stepped forward, appearing at Amphar, Dallas, supporting causes close to her, and later arriving at Paris Fashion Week with her daughters by her side. No dramatic interviews, no messy public back and forth, just calm, deliberate presence. She wasn't just telling the world she was moving on, she was showing her daughters that life continues, even when everything changes. Custody battles in Hollywood often turn ugly, but so far, this one hasn't been defined by bitterness. Instead, it's been defined by structure. Nicole keeps the home routine intact. Keith remains part of their lives. And both, reportedly, are focused on minimizing disruption. Because when a marriage between two global stars ends, the kids don't just lose a united household, they risk losing normalcy. For Nicole, protecting that normalcy seems to be her top priority. This part of the story doesn't make viral headlines. There are no shocking sound bites here, just a mother quietly solidifying the center of gravity for her family. And as custody arrangements settled, one truth became clearer than ever. The same life that once held them together, the tours, the films, the fame, is now the reason they must live it apart. For almost 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban built a love story that looked unshakable from the outside. Red carpets, stadium lights, carefully chosen words in interviews, smiles that made headlines. They weren't just a couple, they were a symbol. Proof many believed that true love could survive Hollywood's spotlight. But here's the truth that most people forget. Gloss was never meant to be a guarantee. The same glamorous image that inspired millions was, at the end of the day, just that, an image. It showed the good moments, the shared triumphs, the curated slivers of life designed to shine. It didn't show the quiet spaces in between. It didn't show the months spent on different continents. It didn't show the long-distance phone calls that replaced shared dinners, or the subtle emotional drift that slowly grew into something neither of them could ignore. The gloss couldn't hide what was happening behind closed doors, because it was never supposed to. Public perfection doesn't protect a private bond. It often hides the cracks until they're too wide to close. Their careers, their fame, their larger-than-life status, all the things that made them magnetic as a couple, also made their relationship vulnerable in ways few people can truly understand. When two lives are constantly in motion, love has to be stronger than distance, schedules, and spotlight. And sometimes, even love isn't enough. By the time Nicole whispered, "I can't pretend anymore," the world saw it as a bombshell. But in reality, it was the most honest sentence in a story that had been unfolding quietly for years. It wasn't scandal that ended this marriage. It wasn't one shocking betrayal. It was time, distance, growth, and the truth finally catching up to the image. And maybe that's why their split struck such a chord. Because deep down, people weren't just watching a Hollywood couple fall apart. They were watching the reminder that no one's love story is immune. Not even the ones that sparkle under 1,000 camera flashes. The fairy tale was real, for a while. But fairy tales are chapters, not guarantees. When a love story this big comes to an end, the headlines focus on the shock. The whispers focus on the rumors. But the truth, the real truth, usually lives somewhere in between. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage wasn't just another Hollywood romance. It was nearly 2 decades of love, distance, resilience, and eventually, honesty. And while the world dissected timelines, court filings, and viral clips, Nicole's quiet words said it all. "I can't pretend anymore." That line didn't just end a chapter, it defined it. It reminded everyone watching that even the brightest, most glamorous stories are written by real people with real breaking points. But now, their story moves off the red carpet and into real life. Custody schedules, new beginnings, separate paths, and maybe, someday, peace that doesn't need pretending. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Nicole's decision was the only path forward? Could this marriage have survived if their world slowed down? Or was this ending always inevitable, hidden beneath the glamour from the very beginning? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more deep dives into the real stories behind Hollywood's biggest headlines, the love, the power, the unspoken truths, make sure to hit subscribe and tap that bell so you never miss the next chapter. Because in this world, fairy tales might fade, but the stories, they always keep unfolding.